a great warm welcome this evening to talk about cost of quality associated with construction.
Good evening, I'm Laura Chalkley from Chalkley Easterby. We're an accountancy and project controls practice based in Essex, specialising in construction. So a very warm welcome from me as well.
Thank you, Laura. So a warm welcome then. So the objective really for this evening is to put excellence and profitability, the concept of excellence, masterclass, they go hand in hand. And we're looking this evening at creating knowledge around masterclass excellence associated with the sector of construction. And we're aiming to focus on cost of quality, cost of conformity, cost of getting it right, consequence of non-conformity. So it's going to be quite an interesting evening on looking at cost of quality, but associated direct with customer. And we're looking at how can we actually delight our customers and maximise our use of resource and streamline our operational activity. So we get from an input to an output, that transformation of a requirement right first time every time. And that's our kind of concept for this evening. So welcome everyone and thank you.
And just to have a run through what our agenda for this evening is. So we're going to start off with some key definitions and then move on to setting the scene around kind of what we're going to be talking about and the context. Bob will talk about the PAF model. And then we're going to consider the application of that to managing stakeholder requirements, how to think about implementing improvements, effective auditing, and then how to measure and monitor success. Let's start off just with a bit of scene setting. Could you imagine a situation where every project had a clear client brief from its very outset, a streamlined integrated design process, no misunderstandings, no last-minute design changes, or at least not many of them, smooth and cost-effective procurement without having to order lots of extra materials just in case they were needed or in case something goes wrong, and then a smooth construction process without idle staff or plant time. Sounds a bit like a panacea, and certainly from my experience of construction, something that I would love to see.
Yeah, I mean, picking up there on Laura's point, it could be up to 40% in loss of actual sales revenue due to not getting it right first time. And as a result of ineffective use of resource. And it's actually stated in some case, things like, for example, snagging. In construction, we use that terminology, snagging, and it almost becomes the norm. It's kind of what we do. It's okay. It's how it works. And we come that used to it, but we do very little analysis of it. And we lose opportunities to create that concept of do it right first time. So yeah, 10% at best, 40% on average is lost through not fully effectively managing our processes. So for this, we're looking at kind of, it gets put back to the quality department. That's if there is one, of course, in construction, rather than a quality department. It might be just one person. But should it be really more effectively managed? If you take best in class manufacturing, you know, if you get anything wrong in manufacturing, then there's almost like a full-blown inquiry. But in construction, it's kind of not fully realised the consequence that concept of risk-based thinking and effective risk-based inspection, audit, testing regime, it's not fully there yet. So the construction industry sector has a way to go. We've been on lots of construction sites this year, and certainly it's improving, and certainly, you know, quality is coming into its own more. It is not just about health and safety. And of course, health and safety is crucial and important, but quality management is now filtering into the construction industry. And in some ways, you know, one of the concept of HS2, the high-speed rail, definitely is kind of leading the way in right first time quality and appropriate levels of skilled and trained staff, not just health and safety, but quality as well. And a clear, well understood, rigorous set of working practices that are there and designed to improve and make things as best as they can right first time. And that concept of lessons learned is coming in more as well. You know, the effectiveness of continuous organisation learning is definitely there. Lots of good evidence of it. But I think now is the kind of infancy phase of all this as it starts to develop. And I think certainly this year, lots of good positive things are happening. And now we're going to be seeing it progress and develop and grow throughout 2022. So what do we mean by these key definitions? When we talk about efficiency, we as an organisation see the efficiency of our activities. For example, if we've got 30 sheets of plasterboard and we need 30 sheets of plasterboard to complete a job, but we've had to get 36 sheets of plasterboard to complete the job, then we see the efficiency of our operational activity. And of course, that is something that the organisation sees. And where it used to be took for granted is kind of the norm to order more material than what's actually needed. With this concept of quality cost, it's becoming much more over and above the radar to get it right first time. Effectiveness. When we talk about the effectiveness to which planned activities are realised and planned results achieved, this is more what the client sees. So the organisation sees efficiency. The client sees the effectiveness of our processes. So it's becoming more and more, you know, extreme, because one thing that we can't measure, and that is reputation. We can never measure reputation, because people complain to themselves or to the friends, but reputation, you just never know always what damage has been done until it's too late. So it's so important there, but that efficiency and effectiveness is realised. And of course, this PowerPoint this evening is featuring and linked to ISO 9001. So these kind of efficiency and effectiveness is engaged in that standard. Innovation. Always ask ourselves, what can we do different? What can we do better? When we get to work, you know, tomorrow, and we sit and have a cup of coffee before it all starts, And we say to ourselves that innovation, what can I actually do to add value rather than add cost? And this is the type of thing that's coming in more and more there to play. And, you know, determination, the activity find out one or more characteristics. So what are the characteristics of the job? The characteristics are risk points. Excuse me. If we look at drawings as an example, what are the critical characteristics on the drawings that potentially has an impact to feasibility and has an impact to risk management? That clause 6.1, actions to address risk and opportunity, more and more coming into cost.
Sorry, we've got a slight technical hitch.
So I'll just explain.
Yeah.
So cost of conformity. When we talk about cost of conformity, this is kind of an acceptable level of quality cost. Cost of conformity might be really good, effective upfront planning. You know, in manufacturing language speak, we call it advanced product quality planning. But this is where, to the best of our ability, we apply really good techniques around pre-construction phase, that pre-constructing tendering phase. And we make sure we do some kind of feasibility. What is it that we've got to do? What is it we've got to construct? What are applicable to our lessons learned? This cost of conformity includes, have we got the capabilities? Have we got the capacity? So cost of conformity is the cost of doing it right, which we have to invest in doing it right with our people, with our plant and equipment, with our quality planning. So cost of conformity is front end, and it's kind of an okay cost of quality. Cost of non-conformity, that is the cost of ineffective processes. What's the objective of a process? The transformation of an input to an output with interrelated processes. So which one of these interrelated processes has caused us a problem? And if we look at processes, they have process owners. So cost of non-conformity is the cost of failure, the cost of having to do it again, the cost associated with an ineffective process. And it's our job as the quality team to identify which process in the chain of the input to the output with interrelated processes, which one of these interrelated processes has caused us a problem. So for this, we think about the 7 quality principles, and these are in ISO 9001. They're right at the front, and we say to ourselves, the quality management principles are customer focus. So we all need to consider this concept of do it right first time. DIRFT, do it right first time. Why shouldn't we do it right first time in construction? Again, linking this concept of do it right first time, the consequence in manufacturing seems to be more known, seems to be more worried about, seems to be more controlled or feared. But in construction, for what we're seeing at the moment, it's not quite fully there. And I'd say do it right first time is in its infancy. When we talk about leadership, so quality principle number 2 is leadership. Has the leadership team become engaged, involved, part of the effectiveness and efficiency planning of the business? Does everybody have a clear, identified concept of strategy and strategic direction? Has that leadership team set effective objectives that people can work to, that people are accountable for to deliver right first time excellence? Has that engagement of people, that set ownership of process owners, do the process owners have the ability to work to the strategic direction? Do they know what it is? Do they have a concept of quality cost delivery service, QCDS? Process approach. Number 4 of the 7, the process approach. What's the definition of a process? The definition of a process is the transformation of an input, customer requirement, to an output through interrelated processes. And let's say right first time every time. When we talk about quality management principle number 6, we talk about that kind of evidence-based approach to decision making. We really don't want to just have another opinion. We want factual details so that we can make really good decisions based on facts. Relationship management. You know, we talk about external providers. Clause in the standard in section 8, operational control. If we talk about relationship management, let's talk about the 2 types of supplier management, external provider management. So one of them is raw material that comes in on pallets or in boxes. The other one is outsourced process. So where we control and we engage in our subcontractors, are they adding value effectively? So the concept of that slide in summary, taking the overall influence from ISO 9001 as a structured approach to all sorts of organisations now becoming engaged in construction. Let's get to know and let's get to use more and more the basic toolbox kit, which is the 7 principles of quality. And something somewhere, if we got used to those more and more, all of us, something somewhere would trigger the support for excellence. So what is a quality cost? I mean, it's not zero, that's for sure. We wish it was. But a quality cost is the cost of ensuring that delivery outputs satisfy customer requirements. And that is a cost of quality. It's a cost of quality planning. It's a cost of training. It's a cost of communication. It's a cost of setting up toolbox talks that add value. It's a cost of consultation and participation and engaging others. And it's the cost incurred when the delivery outputs are unsatisfactory and we have to remake, and there's hidden costs there's costs of raw material, but hidden costs may be cost of logistics and transport and the cost of materials again. So what is a quality cost? It's something that all of us really need to get to grips with. We can't afford to put prices up because people won't accept price increases. So more and more, we've got to box clever within the within our processes, and we've got to box clever in the effectiveness right first time of what we do. So we split that up into 3 areas, to be honest. These 3 areas are known as PAF. What are we spending at prevention? What are we spending at appraisal? And what are we spending at failure? Now, we might have to increase our quality costs at the front end, the prevention costs, and reduce it at the failure end, which is the failure cost. There's 2 types of failure. There's identified failure from within the organisation, or there's identified failure that the customer tells us about. So what we might have to do is put these prevention costs, increase them at the front so we can reduce them at the back.
So if we have a bit of a think about construction for a moment, so prevention costs aimed at minimising failure could be things like quality planning, design process improvements. That's thinking about kind of who needs to be involved in the design, at which stage they need to come in. Thinking about supplier pre-qualification and whether you, say, for example, have a register of pre-approved suppliers who've gone through a stringent assessment process. How we capture and manage organisational knowledge, lessons learned, apply that to new projects, as well as how we manage technical knowledge, about making sure staff have the right training to support them in the work they're doing, both from a quality perspective and from a technical perspective, about setting up a quality auditing programme that could be focused on both design and construction phases. In practical terms, things like preventative plant maintenance, just to make sure the risk of it failing once you're onto site is much lower. And then quality improvement programmes aimed at improving processes and getting everybody to think about quality from a more holistic point of view right across the organisation.
So appraisal costs. So carrying on there from Laura's points, which was well read out from prevention. So appraisal costs, now these are a kind of inspection and test, inspection and test plan, inspection of any raw materials that we have to do, site inspections. Appraisal costs would be things like first party audits, internal audits that we do. Appraisal costs could be the cost of equipment calibration. Appraisal costs could be reviewing and monitoring our subcontractors. And these are kind of costs that are acceptable. These are, so the P and the A, prevention costs and the appraisal costs. If we was to create a spreadsheet, and in this spreadsheet, we even if we do it loose figures like £100 an hour or something like that, just at the start, so that we can actually start to understand the cost of quality from the PAF model.
If we move on then to think about the first of the types of failure costs. So this is if something actually goes wrong. So your internal failure costs are things that arise from quality discovered prior to the customer receiving the product. And it's whether it's pre or post customer handover is what defines whether it's an internal or an external failure cost. So say, for example, we're on site and a site inspection reveals that the concrete has been poorly laid, or a brickwork wall has been put up badly, or not to the correct dimensions, they're internal failure costs. And those costs themselves can then result in increased audit and supervision costs. When things go wrong, we're more likely to want to go back and check it more frequently. And you're also going to lose staff and plant downtime while we get new materials in, or while we actually have to get work redone. Another trade might be stood on the side waiting. External failure costs are where we get the biggest customer impact. They're what happen when we've already handed over a project to a customer, and that's really where we don't want to be. So that would arise during snagging or during the defects liability period. So that would show itself in the form of complaints. We could find that we lose profit due to early contract termination if we're working on a couple of projects at the same time for a client. We could find warranties and contractual penalties coming into play. There's obviously the cost of rectifying defects found after handover. And once a client is already in residence in a new property, then it can be a lot more expensive to organise access and get in there and do the work than when you've got free rein before the site's handed over. And there's obviously also the risk of reputational impact and the loss of future work. You know, if they've only got to tell a few other people, and you could potentially lose a lot more projects. If we start to look at the detail now of the cost analysis, costs are either defined as direct costs. So that's costs directly associated with the cost of delivering a project. So that would be design staff costs, materials costs, labour and plant costs. And then you have your indirect costs, which are general overheads and business related expenses. So that would be things like advertising, accountancy, general management costs, admin support. So when you're analysing your costs, the first thing I would recommend doing is to actually make sure you create and apply an appropriate work breakdown structure. So you've got a consistent means of identifying costs and categorising them. Not only will that make sure that they're consistent, but it'll also help you to ensure that you don't thing. When you look at your costs, consider how stable they are and how much they fluctuate. For example, some materials prices might be relatively stable, but if you've got materials that are being brought in from places like China at the moment, then obviously those prices are a lot more liable to fluctuation. So it's good to maybe do a bit of scenario what if modelling. Now, what if this price went up by 10%, or even if it came down by 10%? And also the timing of costs, you know, the impact on your cash flow. For example, if you've got a project and it runs behind, you may have been relying on that income. If it's a particular part of the contract where it's high revenue generating tasks, then you might have an impact on your cash flow that you were expecting to be able to allocate to be able to pay general business overheads. And costs should also be considered as to whether they're controllable or whether they're not controllable. So controllable costs might be something like staff. So you can control your staff costs by increasing or decreasing your number of staff. But something like rent is a fixed cost that you're committed to, whether you use a building or not. And then you should be looking to assess your current quality costs using the PAF, that's the prevention, appraisal and failure model. Look at tracing your processes end to end and categorise the existing quality costs under each. What's working well? What's the approximate cost of each type of cost? So, for example, if you're doing your auditing, you know, is it costing you £2,000 a month? Is it costing you £500 a month? Are there any quick wins that you can see where improvement is needed? For example, if you have an issue where it's one gang laying concrete that always causes problems, maybe that could be a quick win to get them some extra training or to get them a bit more supervision. And then think about which failure costs pose the biggest business risks. Obviously, they're the ones to focus on. And it's always good to think about things using the plan, do, check and act, or plan, do, act, check framework. That's one that I know Bob in particular highly recommends. And it's just a good way of looking at things, and it then becomes a continuous cycle of improvement.
That's right, Laura, because the Plan, Do, Check, Act is actually in ISO 9001. So it's great if we can actually be seen to be deploying it. That concept, it was created by Dr. W. Deming, and probably lots of us know that. And it's in the standard, and it's a way of a simplistic way of engaging everyone to use that approach from maybe team leaders, lower level project managers in training, project managers themselves, and even senior managers can use that concept of Plan, Do, Check, Act. Thanks, Laura.
Okay. And then once you've done your cost analysis, it's the old gap analysis model. So think about where you want to be, and then you can work out what you've got to do to get there. So once you've done your analysis of the status quo, have a think about where you want to be. Which quality costs do you need to focus on? So it's about optimizing the prevention and appraisal costs. So they've got to make a good business case for themselves. So it's not about auditing everything that moves, but taking a risk-based approach to it. And then obviously looking to eliminate your failure costs. Key areas to focus on are the management of stakeholder requirements, how you identify and implement improvements in your quality processes, how you determine and implement effective audit, inspection and test programs, and then how you measure success. If you don't measure it, you can't improve it.
Okay, thank you, Laura. So this is a part of ISO 9001, or if we hadn't got ISO 9001, a concept for us to really consider, for us to take into account. What actually is it that we need to create for our customer? Have we fully understood what the customer wants? Now, maybe some of you are thinking at this stage, but the customer doesn't always know what they want themselves. And that is true to say in construction. It's very difficult sometimes for us to understand what the customer wants. And sometimes we have to ensure that we support the customer in knowing what they want in terms of the right level of specification or the right standards of, say, concrete or civil engineering underground concept. And this is quite an important area of, this is where feasibility is done. This is where risk analysis is done. This is where lessons learned are captured. And also within construction, there is the ever increasing statutory and regulatory requirements. You know, we are actually producing a product and selling this product, i.e. construction, into a specification. So we've agreed contract reviews and everything. So it's quite important for us to ensure that we've got the ability, the capability, everything needed for consistent and necessary right first time objective approach. And the organisation can meet the requirements of this product and service. And obviously, as much as possible, manage risk. You know, as you know, that concept of preventative action has been now taken out of ISO 9001, but equally in its place is risk-based approach and that opportunity-based approach. So actions to address risk and opportunity really needs to link to this clause. And when we're determining requirements of product and service, think of linkage, think of roles and responsibilities. Think of what does the process say. If you look at clause 9.2.1 in ISO 9001, it's got three things in there, 9.2.1. The first one is, are we working to the organisation's planned arrangements? So what are the planned arrangements for determining the requirements of product and service? Then it's got number 2, the requirements from this international standard, which is of course that clause there in this case. And then it's got, are they effectively applied? So it's really important, even if our organisations haven't got the ISO standard, but this determining the requirements of the product and service is done effectively. And I do understand it's challenging, because I've had said to me on site recently more than once, but we're trying to deliver something, but the customer don't even know what if fully what they want either. So I'm not suggesting that all this is a breeze and we should all know what we're doing. It is challenging, but we've got to manage our risk and we've got to manage our consequence of not doing it right. So, you know, really important that we kind of understand determining the requirements of the product and service.
Thank you, Bob. That now leads us neatly on to stakeholder requirements for construction projects. In every project, it's inevitable that you're going to get some change. The trick is to making it as little as possible and as early as possible in the project. So if we look at things that starting off as at the initiation stage of a project, it's so important to make sure there's a clear statement of outcomes. What does success look like? Yes, we need the ultimate outcome might be a bridge, but is it going to be a concrete bridge? Is there a particular requirement that it needs to be a steel bridge? How many lanes? Is it better to define your specification as performance-based or prescriptive? Having worked kind of with both methods, I like performance-based because that then leaves the scope for the suppliers to express their innovation and bring their technical expertise into maximum play. It's about making sure there's a robust business case that's fully understood by all stakeholders, that there's clear definition of project boundaries, what is and isn't in scope, you know, about stopping scope creep and those extra little bits. You know, the client just comes along to site and says, while you're here, could you just do this for me? I've seen that so many times on a site, and it all adds up in terms of cost and program. About making sure there's clear roles and responsibilities amongst the project team members. Using value engineering to make sure that the client gets the maximum outcome for the minimum cost for their project, and always making sure that there is stakeholder sign-off before you start anything. That way, nobody can turn around and say, oh, I thought you were doing this, but we thought it was that. As we then move on to implementation stage, use of a project gates process is a really good way, again, to help control requirements. It means there's set stages within a project's life cycle where everybody has to formally stop, review where they are, and confirm that there's been no change to the requirements to move forward. It's vital that there's constant communication between the stakeholders and between the project team, that flow of information is two-way, that clients are given plenty of advance notice of decisions that they need to make, and that those decisions are made in a timely manner and then communicated to all the people that need to know. It's always great to have early construction team involvement as well. You know, if you're designing a civil engineering project, if you can get the construction contractor in there early as well, they can bring a wealth of practical knowledge to it. And it's, again, continuing the value engineering process throughout the construction phase. You know, there will be design changes, or there hopefully not many, but there will be some, or there will be unexpected things found on site, for example, unforeseen ground conditions, that mean you're always looking for new and innovative ways to improve things. And most important of all, that there must be a formal change control process so that when change happens, it happens in a managed way and that it's fully accounted for in terms of cost and program. No surprises.
Thank you, Laura. So when we get towards improvement, we can take some concept of improvement from ISO 9001, but it's about deployment of lessons learned. It's about deployment of what's coming out of our risk analysis. This will help us more effectively ensure that we are effectively profitable and we're doing work in relation to the budget that we've set. If we consider change could be good. It could also be risk. And what is the process for change? What happens when change is initiated? There are two areas in ISO 9001 that links to change. We've got clause 6.3, and there's also a section in section 8 about change as well. So we could cross-check these changes. And of course, that's not it, because who's got the roles and the responsibility and the authority to make the changes and to make the decisions? And how are these changes monitored and recorded and managed? So it's all about return on investment. What is our improvement program? If we talk about 6.2, clause 6.2 is objectives and planning to achieve them. So as Laura was saying earlier this evening, if we've got some kind of objective, we need some kind of performance measurement to make sure that that objective is effectively being applied and those intended outcomes are being met. And when we talk about objectives, there's never been a better time. You know, all organisations, as we get towards December, they're doing a little review of what went right and what could have gone better for 2021. And we're creating objectives and planning to achieve them for 2022. So this PowerPoint, in one respect, and our discussions this evening, couldn't have come at a better time for us to start to think about improvement and that a concept of plan, do, check, act. So it's a great time to think about change. And let's involve the external providers and the subcontractors in these improvements. You know, if people want to work for us and work with us, then make them have some accountability and make these subcontractors, you know, share their improvements as well. And let's get really good concepts of competitiveness. Let's be really great at customer focus, customer relation. Let's give our customer the wow factor. You know, when we're looking at cost of quality and we're looking at tendering and we're looking at pre-tendering and we're looking at inspection and test plan, what's coming out of it that the customer will notice? What's making our organisation stand out? And let's be proud to use the terminology of masterclass, and let's make our organisation a centre of excellence. Thank you, Laura. So when we look at implementing these improvements, let's think outside the box. Let's create a view from, you know, let's involve our key players, our project managers, maybe some apprenticeships that's coming into the organisation. How can we more effectively make processes that connect to risk? What staffing levels do we need if we talk of clause 7.1. And let's do away with the terminology that I heard the other day. Somebody was telling me, well, we've always done it like this. Do we really need to change? What do we need to design and implement new strategic direction? How can we better engage our staff in excellence and use this concept? Nobody actually comes to work to do a bad job. So we've got to more influence them to do a fabulous job. How can we connect to success in such a way that the organisation and our customers see it and they see us being better? How can we improve our inspection and test regime? What's coming out of the internal audits in terms of value added, non-conformities that support us making a difference? And let's start communicating through toolbox talks. It's not just about health and safety toolbox talks. How much quality can we put into toolbox talks equally to sell and to influence and to engage our people? How can we effectively track our quality costs to start making a difference? It might be that we have to lift some costing at the front end to reduce it at the failure end. So let's really think in these last few weeks of 2021 about implementing improvement. So there is a standard that could help us do this, and that standard is ISO 19011. And that standard is a standard that helps us do masterclass audits. How can we engage the players? How can we create a more effective audit planning structure? Planning of how we're going to do an audit. How can we create an audit program, which is a concept of a series of audits between January and February, January and December? How can we create and engage people to support the audits? Does that mean we've got to kind of, have a cost of quality in training? How can we plan the audits to improve operational control and engage the right skills at the right time, at the right place to do a great job? And what do our processes say? We talk about processes. What is a process? But people say the process is no good. Do they fully understand what they mean when they say that? The process is there to get us from an input to an output. What part of it is not delivering excellence? So these are the type of things that we could start to look at in terms of effective auditing with a positive financial impact. This is where we're going for excellence. So let's have a look at the creation of internal audits. Internal audits kick off at the feasibility phase. What does the feasibility say? What is our feasibility checklist? Have we got a feasibility checklist? Are we managing our stakeholders effectively? Are we delivering our planned arrangements to the processes? Are we effectively and efficiently delivering quality? Have we got disaster plans in place? Organisations that have asset management and business continuity planning, they're more likely to be able to deliver excellence? Are we effectively managing our document control, plant and equipment? Is the plant and equipment on site at the right time, at the right place, working effectively? Staff competence. Let's engage the players, and what training do people need? How can we influence them to do a better job with us? Communications. In the standard, it talks about what do we communicate, when do we communicate, how do we communicate, and who do we communicate to? Finally, what is the effectiveness of our QMS?
Thank you, Bob. If we move on now to think about what success actually looks like. Every project will have a set of criteria that you will have defined at the start as to what constitutes success. So we need to think about delivery of the planned outcomes. What has actually been delivered on the ground? What was actually envisaged at the beginning? Can we do internal and external benchmarking to assess our own performance against other departments internally and now competitors externally? It's always great as well to have a set of KPIs, key performance indicators that you're working to. And rather than just focusing these on one area, a great model to use is the Kaplan and Norton balanced scorecard, where you look at break down into 4 areas of financial. So that would be things like measuring your profit margin, customer, so number of complaints you receive, the kind of customer feedback that you get, any kind of comments from neighbours on how you're constructing, sort of like with your neighbourhood construction schemes. Looking at how you measure how effective and how efficient your internal processes are. And then look at your organisational capacity. So that's things like your internal learning. Have your staff got the right skills and competencies that they need to deliver the project? So you could be measuring things like number of staff who are incorporated engineers, number of apprentices, number of engineers to number of admin staff. Should also be looking at your degree of innovation. Are you making the most and appropriate use of new technologies coming out? Technology is fast moving now, and there are some great applications for construction as well, for things like from drones for topographical surveying through to smart materials, smart motorways. It's just moving forward so quickly all the time. And then it's about looking at the lessons that you've learned and recording what has and hasn't gone well on a project and what can be applied as future learning to the next round of projects coming forward. I like the saying that what gets measured gets managed. So it's important that you look at every aspect of your business in an integrated way and find ways to measure what's important. That will help to keep people's minds focused. In terms of your key performance indicators, choosing these and capturing the data for them. So in choosing your KPIs, you should be focusing on areas that you identify as needing improvement. So, for example, if you find that there is a skill shortage in a particular area, you could be measuring and monitoring the number of new apprentices coming into that particular field and how quickly they're completing their apprenticeship and how well. And you should always also be focused on areas that are critical to business success. So, for example, if you are a bridge specialist, obviously you've got to make sure that you've always got access to a good pool of bridge engineers, but also that you've got access to an adequate pool of topographical surveyors who can go out and capture the data for that. And you should also consider the ease and automation of data capture and analysis. Again, if it's not going to add value, then I wouldn't suggest that you measure it. I mean, there's so much now that you can do as automatic data capture for as you come along. So with staff automated clocking in and out systems, For staff competencies, there's software that will allow people to record their training and their CPD. And examples of KPIs that you might want to use are quantities of wasted materials, plant and staff utilisation, your actual versus your planned programme, the number of design changes against the original design, number of complaints and compliments from neighbours and clients, and your project gross profit margin. So it's all about keeping a balanced view.
We can work with who is ready.
Bob?
So thank you for that. So quality management is based on continuous improvement. What will we do different, and what will we do better? And let's have a think between us on making some great improvements within the field of construction. So thank you, Laura. And thank you for everyone who's attended this evening, and to the team who's put all this together with us. Done a great job, and I hope that it's kind of inspired some thought for the future. Have we got any? But we would encourage any questions. Anybody got any questions to come in? No? No questions at this stage.
It would be very useful to know what you found helpful about the presentation, any areas of particular interest that you would like to see future webinars on as well. Thank you, Will. So Will's put up about supporting systems into the QMS. So maybe, Bob, is that something you want to make any comments?
Yeah, so support systems into the QMS. Well, the support systems, for a start off, they could start by making sure that we've got kind of visual knowledge of what the stakeholders' expectations are. You know, what does the stakeholder expect from us? The support is always from the senior management, making sure that there's a clear strategy, there's clear objectives, there's clear roles and responsibilities that have been outlined. The support systems also, but there's a proper laid out approach to risk management. You know, that links to what are we good at, that context of the organisation. What are we good at, and what could we do better at? So the support processes would really benefit from a lessons learned register, and then training, some really good support in training and awareness, and really effective communication. So spreading that communication, don't just do toolbox talks on health and safety. Use the concept of toolbox talks into quality management as well. That would be really good. And make sure that everything's kind of document controlled. And calibration, measurement equipment. You know, we heard a story not so long ago where there was a whole series of roofing bolts tightened with a torque wrench that was out of calibration, and it had to be done again. So, you know, this is consequence of not doing and not applying the real basic things in quality management. Control of non-conformance. You know, where there's non-conformance activities going on, let's really get to grip. And another support process in answer to the question there, which is a great question. What is the process and criteria for project release? In the standard, clause 8.6 talks about release. So what is the criteria? How does that release link to roles and responsibilities? How does that release link to knowledge and training? And then in terms of, let's think about effective, not only product design, but process build design. How are we going to get across these processes right first time? How are we engaging is another one. How are we engaging external providers in terms of, you know, materials management and external providers management? And of course, as Laura said many times, you know, this concept of measurement is really important for us.
Absolutely.
Is there any other questions? Any other questions?
There is. In regards to non-conformance reports, I believe that you have to have a specification to measure against. If you haven't got a specification, how would you measure non-conformance?
Well, if you haven't got a specification, you know, create some kind of process that determines effective right first time quality. So there's a section in the standard 4.4 that allows you to write your own processes. And within that process, you could write what is the acceptance criteria. So therefore, although there may not be a standard or anything like that, there's three types of standards. There's international standards, like an ISO. There could be a BS standard, or there could be a company standard. So, you know, where there's no standard in place, make your own acceptance criteria, and we either meet or don't meet that criteria. I hope that's helpful to that question.